Our final talk for this session is by Terrell Russell of the iRODS Consortium, and he's going to talk about the iRODS S3 API, presenting iRODS S3.
Thank you, Corey. So yes, I'm Terrell, and I'm executive director now, which is weird still, but here we go. We'll talk about technical stuff. So here's what we're going to talk about. A history lesson. I'm not close enough. Oh gosh, yes. A history lesson, a bit of status and update, and then I don't think these slides are up to date. Maybe they are. Did we hit refresh recently? All right, I'm gonna hit, yeah, can we hit refresh real quick? Is there a button for that? I think I got rid of the future direction part. We don't know enough yet. Yeah, see, there it goes. How do I make it full screen again? All right, see, the future is gone. We did it, we fixed it. So yes, what we've done, where we are, and then the future. So it did not change. Did it change? Oh my gosh. All right. Surprisingly complicated. Everybody wants to talk to an S3 endpoint. It's taken over the world. It's easy enough. There's lots and lots of tools that are already out there that do this very well. It also decouples authentication, so it allows people to not have to integrate their various 2-factor, 7-factor authentication schemes. So in this case, the decoupled is a feature in the sense that it's just a key pair. And then those can get rotated at organizational policy level. The other reason this is interesting is it does align with our last couple years of protocol plumbing, which is what we called it. We had a talk where we've talked about the community's efforts around SFTP and WebDAV and all these other cool things that are not the iRODS protocol. Turns out that most tools in the world don't speak the iRODS protocol, and they don't really want to change what they do. So if we can meet them halfway, that's a compelling argument. So this is another part of that same effort. It also means that because protocols don't change very often once they're widely used, it means that this is an extremely maintainable thing for us to have and hold, because it won't need to move very much once it works correctly. So the goal really is to present iRODS as S3. Obviously, that comes with some limitations because it's not the full beam of all the things that we can do, but the people who want this, they don't care about that. They just want to get their data in and out. Maybe they want some metadata. Maybe we don't know yet. We're still working on that. We are also not interested in reinventing things. We want to reuse as much as possible. We want to make it load balancer friendly. We know that's a very grown up and real thing. Just making it work is not going to work under load, right? We have to get out of the way of the army of the internet showing up for all their data. So it has to not necessarily hold state in a way that's not friendly. And of course, again, maintainable. It gets to be on the slide twice because it's so important. So the story here is that we knew this. We spun up a working group, talked about it yesterday a little bit. This is the link that has all the full discussions of all the meetings we've had. I'm going to give you a history lesson and walk through them in 3 or 4 slides instead of making you read all of that. The initial email to the community was July, so almost 2 years ago, which seems very short and also very long ago. And it included 4 options as we saw it at the time of how to get to the glory land from where we started, right? We did some initial brainstorming, and here are all the words that were in part of that email. So the first option was to update and maybe kind of put our arms around this initial MinIO gateway implementation done by BioTeam 5, 6 years ago, something like that. Time, what is time? That was using at the time, the Go library that was out there. It was called iRODS. It's a good name. It was just a wrapper around the C client. So it was not going to be as maintainable, and we knew that. But option one, right? Just kind of take that implementation and run with it and see how far it would go. Option two, convert that implementation to using the new thing that Il Young had written, pure Go client. So there was no C wrapper. We wouldn't be dependent on compilation and platforms and all that kind of good stuff. Option three was do number two, but then not maintain it, right? Just make the gateway and then hand it to upstream. See if we can get it merged into upstream min.io, and then cool, they're doing it. It works. Never needs to change. That would be amazing. Number four, do it ourselves, because that wasn't going to work. Those were our four ideas at the time in July of 2021. I wrote at the time, I'm leaning towards option three as the best balance between doing the work and not having to maintain it forever, right? So we investigated these four options over time. I broke this kind of into four phases. The first three options was phase one. Option four was, oh, it turns out we have to build one. And then phase three and four was the friends we made along the way. So phase one, option one, it was really limited, not maintainable, because it was wrapping the C client. So we worked that out pretty quickly. That kind of went off the table pretty fast in July. Option two was change it over to use the Go client. Turns out that for that to work, we had to have some ticket integrations and be able to authenticate and figure out who's asking, and then figure out how that resolves to a collection in iRODS. And so there were a couple technical bits about how to line that up. So the library had to learn how to do tickets, and that happened before October. We implemented a ticket booth, a place where you can go get your S3 credentials, and then they give you a couple tokens, and then you can hand it to this thing, and you get your data, right? That we were building kind of this sidecar, or this ticket booth, or box office. We couldn't come up with a name. It was very important to get the name right. But it needed for this system to have admin credentials, and that was not really what we wanted. At least we weren't sure. It seemed bold to have to run another service with an admin credential that wasn't actually doing anything except getting a ticket. We implemented this, and by we, I mean Corey implemented this, and in doing so, figured out that, well, if you're going to have all those credentials and do this work, it might as well just be part of the C++ REST API, because really just that, if that thing learns how to do tickets, it's a superset of what the ticket booth would be. So we worked all that out by November. And then by February, we figured out that even if we do all this work, that min.io doesn't support multi-user environments, multi-tenant environments. The auth code in min.io was in the core. It was earlier than we would get a chance as part of this gateway, this plugin functionality of min.io. We were going to be too late in the process to be able to do anything interesting. So all that kind of made the option two kind of not going to work. Maybe we can be in the upstream and then tie into the core, maybe get access to something a little earlier if they integrate and they understand what we're doing. And then in May, they announced that they're not going to actually continue having a gateway at all. So they just pulled the rug right out as a community. They decided, so min.io is a funded organization. They've got VC money. They have people they have to make happy, and supporting what they called, in quotes, the legacy POSIX interface. Oh, it hurts. They just took that away. So all of these were off the table. Not really of our own choosing, but we learned a lot. Option four, we got to do it ourselves. Okay, so yay, it removes a dependency on other code bases. Turns out that's a weakness. We didn't think that was a weakness until about a month prior when they pulled the rug. We are going to focus on having one collection be one bucket, not the whole zone, because we knew that we had use cases where someone wanted to share more than one part of a namespace as different buckets to different users at the same time, okay? So then we had the choice, okay, let's pick some technology. We went through options with Pistache, Oat, and Drogon. And then by November of 2022, we had picked Boost Beast. All of this work was done by Violet. She was part of our group. She was an intern for 2 summers, did a great job, and we handed her this project for 6 months, and we thought that was a good scoping of what she was capable of and what to do. So she did all of this work in terms of investigation and having opinions. The initial endpoints were working by January of, what year are we in, this year? And had, at this point, a user mapping plugin interface, as well as a bucket mapping plugin interface. And the idea behind this is it allows us to both satisfy the multi-user requirement from the use cases that we had, as well as this multi-bucket. You had to have a name of a bucket map to a particular logical path, right? We don't necessarily want the last part of the logical path to be the bucket name, because that's not unique. It's not, there's some namespacing issues here. So if you abstract this, we have 2 mappings that we have to hold in this API at the same time to be able to provide the functionality that we wanted. So all of this brain work was done. We were ready by January. In the meantime, we sent Il Yang off into the weeds in various directions along the way. We had other good ideas, so many good ideas. SFTP Go, already legitimate. Well, what if it just also learned how to be an S3 server? That can't be so hard, no problem. Maybe there's already one written in Go. Maybe somebody else has already tried to solve this. Zinco doesn't know about iRODS, but maybe we could teach it. So Zinco is a JavaScript framework. It's like, well, okay, don't know that we want that. Let's go investigate. JuiceFS doesn't know about iRODS. It still doesn't know about iRODS. All right. Oh, maybe we could put Juice in front of SFTP Go. Same problem. No, that's not going to work. Garage HQ is also an S3 service that you can tack on a back end. That wasn't going to work. I don't think is that the Rust one? We don't have any, yeah, don't know, don't remember. Or IBM has an in-memory S3 service, kind of compelling, was not applicable to what we did here. So Il Yang was out running around, and we were very excited about him finding the answer and solving it for us, and it didn't happen. So phase 3, this spring, okay, we're going to do all this. We've got an initial implementation. Multi-part, that's hard. Okay, here's another set of 4 things where we can totally do this. How to do multi-part into iRODS. It's a compelling question. We came up with 4 ideas. One would be to write all of those parts individually into iRODS and then put them back together in the server. Great, very simple. However, could be triggering a ton of extra policy and make Tony very upset. So we don't want to make Tony unhappy. We're not sure how to, and also require this new concatenation function. 2, maybe the API that's sitting in the middle can hold all the data and concatenate it there and then send it to iRODS all at once. That's another option. Very simple, doesn't trigger all the extra policy, but now you have to have enough space in your API service to hold potentially huge data sets. Not really where we want to be either. Maybe we can be a little better. Maybe we can hold on to only the parts that aren't quite contiguous and just kind of shunt them over as we're going and do this the whole time, and it'll be fine. Well, it turns out the S3 protocol allows you to send them out of order and resend them and send them twice and send them 5 times. And it's like, that's a lot of bookkeeping. Not sure how that's going to work in case we get out of order. So then we have to be back and store everything again. And then the last one was store and register. So maybe we write it all down where iRODS can see it. Write it down locally, and then just tell iRODS to register it in place. That's okay. That's possibly good. You only have to do a register thing, but it does create a dependency for iRODS to be able to see that location, and that's not going to be a realistic scenario necessarily for most people who might want to run this. We don't know, maybe. Also, in case something happens and it goes sideways, iRODS never finds out, and now you've got a situation. None of these are obviously the winner. So we punted in June. Oh, that's now. Okay, yeah. So we don't know how to do that yet. We do have a demo. No, we don't have a demo. We have demonstrated a working connection with just the Bodo client. But if we try to do something interesting, we have an HMAC situation. So we didn't quite get over that hurdle before I had to give this talk today. So I'm sorry. We'll get there. This is the very extensive architecture, just proving that there's no extra parts. We're talking about a little thing that sits in front of iRODS, and somebody can talk to it with a key pair. Like that is literally the architecture. The goal is to have a single binary. It does require the RODS admin credentials. It will be proxying those connections. So once the S3 stuff happens, and I know that you're Bob, the RODS admin will proxy as Bob to do the iRODS-y things, right? Right now, it has two configuration files, one for this part and one for that part. We have implemented endpoints for these things. Multi-part, obviously, awaiting good, smart input from smart people. Don't know how to do that yet. And then we're not clear if we want to implement these, if there is demand there. Do we want to teach it how to do tagging? Do we want to implement metadata, S3 metadata as iRODS meta in both directions? How does that work? ACLs, permissions? How do we convey iRODS permissions back through S3 semantics? Don't know. Don't know if I want it. Don't know if anybody wants it. Turns out list objects V2 is totally cool. List objects V1 wasn't called V1 at the time. We just called it list objects back then. Turns out that some of the libraries that people use are still using that older call, and we haven't implemented that yet. So as soon as we tried to use the AWS command line client, this thing was like, I don't know what that is. So we have some work to do. Here's the configuration. This is not yet real because remember there were two separate files today. This is where I kind of want to go, make it look a lot like NFS rods, make it look a lot like the HTTP front end. Half the brain is in one side, half the brain is in the other. I want it to look like this, but again, input welcome. I don't know what the variables look like yet. Obviously, host, port, logging. Here's the bucket mapping and the user mapping. We currently have the static ones working. That's what the demo kind of thing works on right now. But that means it's not very dynamic, right? I can say that I want this bucket name to match to this logical path, but that's hard-coded in the JSON of the API. Not as great. Or you could have that information live somewhere else. We'd have to write some kind of plugin to make it go get that from a good place, resolve it, whatever. We don't know about that yet. But the idea is that that's where that would live. Same idea behind the user mapping. Somebody showed up with a key pair, and I want to tell the system that that is Bob. Okay, well that information can live here, static, or maybe it should come from some other system. Okay, well, how does that work? We have to go dynamically go get that. Maybe it lives in iRODS. Okay, but that's going to be slow. Maybe it lives in a LDAP system somewhere else. Okay, maybe that's going to be slow. Maybe there's a caching layer. Don't know yet. Tell me what you want, and we can argue about how to implement it, right? Here's the iRODS client side. Looks extremely similar to what we've seen before. Here's all the stuff. Here's the proxy account. And then again, connection pooling and smart stuff that Corey said earlier. Next steps are obviously the first two are get our configuration stuff squared up and figure out why we can't authenticate somebody yet. Obviously want to package this and get it out the door so somebody can bang on it and then Tony can be happy or angry. Test it. We're actually interested in pointing iRODS at this thing as an S3 resource, which is going to make Justin unhappy. And then see if we can make it fall over. And of course, like I said, the additional mappings both on the bucket and the user side. So we think this is really compelling. I think a lot of people are really going to want this. It makes iRODS data stores, grids, zones much more approachable for many additional clients, and that's the point. Thank you.
Thanks, Terrell. Any questions?
a lot of the Dataverse community members would be very interested in this for on-premise storage. But from experience with other S3 compatible services, they have found themselves in the somewhat strange position of having to pass more options than Amazon makes available in the first place. So how closely do you think you can follow the protocol? How seamless do you think you can make it?
I think that we're pretty good, and we know a lot about S3 because we've found bugs in every other implementation we've ever tested. We have given feedback to every service that offers S3, I think, except for the most recent one. They got it in one. So we know a lot. Don't plan on implementing all of it because, like I said, I don't even know what ACLs look like. What does it mean? So I think we have a good shot. It would be interesting to hear from, again, we're always use case driven. So who's in the room and what are the bugs? Yeah, absolutely.
Question over here.
I know I've already asked this to Terrell like offline, but I think it's for the broader audience. We've been seeing more and more users come with their own entitlement. So like it's a lab or a PI that has their secret and keys. Our intention is to try and support multi-user. So it's not just one S3 per zone or per location, but more importantly, having it where it's a directory anywhere on iRODS and you can map it onto S3 and then use that secret and key. And I know Tony has started some early work on that as well. So I'm hoping that we can support that at any scale that we need. And there are no artificial limits that it's 5 per zone or something of that sort. So that's one. And the other is, if we can make this something that the users themselves can do rather than a system level. By that, what I mean is I'm bringing my own secret and key, and then I can implement that integration where the bucket then is managed through my work rather than me contacting the administrator.
Yeah.
And I've often found when you give that kind of power to the users, they're willing to do more things with it than relying on one person on their campus or a grid maintainer. So those two things I think are really important as a capability.
Yeah, I think the first one should be completely absorbed by the thinking that this slide represents, right? We've heard that before, and so that's why part of this was on, this is why this exists. Right now, we only have the local and static because we're just proof of concept right now. When you talk about somebody bringing their own, either bringing their own bucket or at least bringing their own credentials to a service, that's almost this upside down. That's about making a resource within iRODS talk to an existing system. That's going to require some other GUI or maintenance system to then populate one of these credentials, right? But if we're going to do it like a pass through, like a fake one, then that could also populate this information that would be one of these external or dynamic ones, right? So this could reach out to that, which was informed by some GUI, which was informed by somebody else. And I think the flexibility is there, but don't know what there shouldn't be any lip scaling. I mean, that shouldn't be a problem if we get this right. Not implicitly anyway. Oh, one more. Between you and lunch.
We're going to be here a while.
Oh.
So, has anyone considered using the shared memory file descriptor table in the S3 plugin, which will allow you to stream multiple parts into a single data object in parallel?
But that's in the plugin in iRODS.
No, I mean, it would be leveraging it on the front end with the S3 server. So it can accept multiple parts, open in a single data object in multiple streams.
I see.
Stream directly into a single data object without having to go through all of your additional gymnastics.
So you're proposing an E.
This is option 5.
Option E or 5.
Yes,
So we're going to write that down during lunch
on a napkin.
on a napkin with some hummus. Yes.
Perfect.
I would love for there to be a good answer. So yes, let's do that.
Any other questions? All right.